My name is Alara Vance. For as long as I can remember, my life has been shaped by the quiet, steady rhythm of the natural world. I grew up in the misty embrace of Port Blossom, Oregon, a town nestled between the deep green of the coastal forests and the moody gray of the Pacific. My father was a botanist, my mother a potter, and our home was a sanctuary of earth and art. From them, I inherited a love for things that grow, for the patient unfolding of beauty. It's what led me to my calling as a landscape designer. I find a profound peace in shaping spaces, in coaxing life from soil, in creating gardens that serve as havens for others. My work is a conversation with the land, a slow and deliberate art of listening and responding. My life, like one of my gardens, had found its own gentle equilibrium. And the brightest, most central part of that landscape was Leo. Leo, an architect whose designs were as thoughtful and solid as he was, came into my life like a sudden, warm burst of sun after a long winter rain. We met over blueprints and soil samples for a community park project, and our connection was immediate, a shared language of form, function, and a deep appreciation for creating lasting beauty. He understood the silent poetry of a well-placed stone path, and I admired the elegant strength of his structural lines. Our love grew organically, without rush or pretense, settling into a comfortable, supportive partnership that felt as natural as breathing. When he proposed, it wasn't with grand gestures or a public spectacle. It was on a Tuesday evening in our small cottage, with the rain pattering against the windows and the scent of damp earth wafting in from the garden. He had made my favorite soup, and as we sat by the fire, he simply took my hand, his eyes full of a love so deep and steady it felt like coming home. He spoke not of forever in the abstract, but of the specific, tangible forevers he wanted with me. Forevers of morning coffees, shared projects, quiet evenings, and navigating the inevitable storms together. Of course, I said yes. My heart felt like a seed that had finally found the perfect conditions to sprout. Planning our wedding felt like designing the most important garden of my life. Leo and I envisioned something small, intimate, and deeply personal, a reflection of us. We wanted the scent of pine and saltwater, the warmth of candlelight, and the company of the people who had nurtured our growth. It was supposed to be a joyous, creative process. And then, there was Helena, Leo's mother. When Leo first told her we were engaged, her voice over the phone was effervescent, a cascade of delighted exclamations. She lived in San Francisco, a world of polished marble and high-stakes real estate, a stark contrast to our quiet life in Port Blossom. She spoke of me as the daughter she'd always wanted and expressed a fervent desire to be involved, to forge a real bond. A dream come true for a woman who had lost her own mother young. I felt a surge of warmth and gratitude. I was not just marrying Leo, I was gaining a family. The first inkling that our visions might not align came subtly. During our planning calls, Helena's suggestions, while offered sweetly, were for things far grander than we had in mind. She spoke of renowned caterers from the city, of opulent floral arrangements, of a guest list that seemed to expand with every conversation. "It's your day, of course, my dears," she would say, her voice like honey. "I'm just offering a few ideas to make it truly memorable." Leo, ever the diplomat, would gently steer the conversation back to our simpler plans, trying to find a balance between our desires and his mother's enthusiasm. I saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he chose his words, and a small, quiet worry began to take root in my heart. The wedding was becoming less about Leo and me, and more about navigating the delicate ecosystem of Helena's expectations. I knew, with the certainty of a gardener sensing an impending frost, that we needed to establish our own ground. My initial excitement about getting to know Helena blossomed when she announced she was coming to stay for a long weekend. To help with the planning, darling, she'd chirped over the phone, and for us girls to have some real quality time. I pictured us poring over magazines, laughing, sharing stories. I saw the beginnings of a new, cherished relationship. I tidied the guest room, bought her favorite tea, and prepared to welcome her with an open heart. The reality of her visit, however, unfolded differently, like a flower that reveals an unexpected and dissonant color as it opens. The first sign was small, almost dismissible. On Saturday morning, I made my favorite buttermilk pancakes, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. I served them on the handcrafted plates my mother had made for us, feeling a quiet pride in the simple, heartfelt meal. Leo was outside on the porch, sipping his coffee and enjoying a rare moment of Oregon sunshine. Helena sat at our small kitchen table, a vision of tailored elegance even in her casual wear. She smiled as I set a plate before her. "Oh, my. How lovely, Elara. I suppose a little indulgence is fine now and then. You're one of those lucky women who doesn't have to watch every little thing." I laughed, a little uncertainly. "I just love a good breakfast." "Of course, you do," she said, her smile never wavering. But her eyes flickered over my frame, a quick, almost imperceptible assessment. The pancake suddenly felt heavy in my stomach. Later that afternoon, we sat on the sofa with a stack of bridal magazines. My fingers traced the delicate lace on a gown in one of the photos. Helena leaned over, her perfume a cloud of expensive florals. "That one is exquisite," she commented, pointing to a slender, statuesque model in a sheath dress. "It requires such a specific silhouette, though. So unforgiving. A real couture body." The implication hung in the air between us, unspoken but clear. The dress wasn't for a body like mine, a body that was soft and curved, a body I had always felt at home in. I turned the page, a cold knot forming in my chest. The weekend continued in this vein. While shopping for table linens, she recounted a story about her friend's daughter who had gone on a bridal boot camp before her wedding. "She looked simply transformed," Helena said, her gaze pointedly on me. "Lost 20 pounds. Her husband was thrilled." I murmured something about being happy with who I am, but my voice sounded small. Her judgment, cloaked in helpful anecdotes and sweet smiles, was beginning to feel like 1,000 tiny paper cuts. The most unsettling part was the precision of it all. These comments, these subtle erosions of my confidence, were reserved only for me. The moment Leo walked into a room, Helena would transform. Her voice would soften, her posture would relax, and she would lavish me with praise. "Elara has such wonderful taste, Leo," she'd say, or "I'm so thrilled you found a woman who is so comfortable in her own skin." It was dizzying, like living in two different realities simultaneously. In one, I was Leo's beloved fiancée, a woman he cherished for her mind, her heart, and the body that housed them. In the other, I was a project, a piece of clay Helena felt compelled to mold into a shape more pleasing to her eye. I didn't tell Leo. How could I? The words felt petty and small when I tried to form them in my mind. "Your mother hinted I should lose weight." It sounded like the complaint of an insecure teenager, not a grown woman. We were so happy, so deeply immersed in the joy of our engagement, and I didn't want to be the one to introduce a note of discord. I told myself I could handle it. I was a strong woman, proud of my curves, proud of the space I occupied in the world. Her words were like pebbles thrown at a sturdy oak, annoying, perhaps, but incapable of causing real damage. But the pebbles kept coming. Helena's visits became more frequent, her presence a constant hum of low-grade anxiety in our home. She'd arrive on a Friday evening, her suitcase full of gifts and her head full of suggestions, and stay through Sunday, effectively consuming the precious weekend hours I had carved out for wedding planning. Her opinions were woven into every decision. The font on the invitations was a bit rustic, the local wildflower bouquets I wanted were sweet, but perhaps not formal enough. I found myself tensing every time the phone rang, bracing for the announcement of another impending visit. One Thursday, she called. "Darling, I was thinking I'd drive up this weekend. We can finally tackle the dress situation." A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I needed space. I needed a weekend to myself, to breathe, to think, to plan without a running commentary. "Oh, Helena, that's so thoughtful," I began, my mind racing for a plausible excuse. "Actually, I was planning on going to a few boutiques on Saturday, just to get a feel for things by myself." "Oh, how wonderful," she exclaimed, completely missing my cue. "Don't you dare go without me. A girl needs her mother's eye when choosing a dress. I'll be there first thing Saturday morning." I felt a cornered animal's panic. I couldn't refuse without sounding rude, without creating a conflict Leo would inevitably be pulled into. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word tasting like defeat. "That sounds lovely." I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the resilient ferns in my garden, wondering where my own resilience had gone. The day of dress shopping with Helena was as draining as I had feared. She swept into each boutique like a seasoned general inspecting her troops, her discerning eye dismissing entire racks of gowns with a flick of her wrist. She took on a cloyingly maternal role, pulling dresses that were nothing like my style, ornate, stiff, and overly structured. "Let's just try this one, for me," she'd coax, holding up a beaded monstrosity. In the dressing room, I felt like a doll being subjected to an endless, frustrating game of dress-up. "That cut is too severe for your shoulders," she'd pronounce. "This fabric, it clings in the wrong places." Her critiques were relentless, chipping away at my resolve. There was one dress, a simple A-line with delicate, vine-like embroidery cascading down the skirt, that made my heart flutter. It felt like me. When I stepped out to show her, a flicker of genuine hope sparked within me. She tilted her head, her lips pursed in thought. "It's nice, Elara. Serviceable." She walked around me, her gaze clinical. "Perhaps a little tight in the waist, don't you think? It's pulling a bit. Something with more of a ball-gown skirt, something more forgiving, might be more flattering to your figure." The spark of hope died. I looked at my reflection, and for the first time, I didn't see me. I saw the pulling at the waist, the way my hips curved, the softness of my arms. I saw all the flaws she had illuminated. We left the shop empty-handed, and I felt a profound sense of deflation, as if the joy of this once-in-a-lifetime moment had been systematically drained from me. When Helena finally departed on Sunday evening, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and unsolicited advice in her wake, the silence in our little cottage was a balm. I needed to reclaim this experience. A few days later, she began texting, asking when we were going again. I gave vague, non-committal answers, desperate to keep my next attempt a secret. But my well-intentioned fiancé, in a moment of casual conversation with his mother, mentioned my plans to go shopping again that coming Saturday with my own mom, Eleanor, and my maid of honor, Chloe. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Helena. "Leo tells me you're going dress shopping on Saturday. What time should I be there?" The panic rose in my throat again, hot and sharp. I couldn't do it. I couldn't subject myself to another day of her scrutiny. I needed the supportive, loving environment that only my mother and my best friend could provide. In that moment, a new, unfamiliar resolve hardened within me. It was the instinct for self-preservation. "Oh, Helena," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "The boutique I'm going to, Whispering Lace, they're very small. They have a strict policy for their private viewings, only the bride and 2 guests are allowed, to keep the experience intimate." The lie tumbled out, clumsy and breathless. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, that's a rather peculiar policy, isn't it?" she said, her tone laced with suspicion. "I know, it's just their way," I rushed on, my heart pounding. "My mom and Chloe are already confirmed." "I'm so sorry." I could feel the weakness of the lie, thin and fragile as a spider's web. But it was the only shield I could conjure. I ended the call quickly, my hand trembling as I set the phone down. A wave of guilt washed over me. I had just lied to the woman who would be my mother-in-law. It felt wrong, dishonest, a departure from the open-hearted person I prided myself on being. But as the guilt subsided, it was replaced by something else, a fierce, protective feeling. This was my moment. This was about finding a dress that would make me feel like the truest version of myself as I walked toward the man I loved. And I deserved to have that experience surrounded by unadulterated joy and support, not veiled criticism. The lie, I realized, was not an act of malice, but an act of boundary setting, a clumsy but necessary first step in tending to the garden of my own well-being. On Saturday morning, the guilt was a faint echo in the back of my mind, easily drowned out by the bright, cheerful voices of my mother and Chloe. The air in the car was filled with laughter and excitement as we drove to Whispering Lace, a charming boutique tucked away on a cobblestone side street. The lie had bought me this peace, and I resolved to soak in every moment of it. The boutique was a haven of ivory, silk, and quiet anticipation. There were no pronouncements on what would or wouldn't flatter my figure, only encouragement and genuine delight. "Oh, Ilara, that one brings out the color of your eyes," my mother would say, her own eyes shining. "You look like a goddess," Chloe would declare, her support a warm, solid presence beside me. And then I found it. It wasn't a dress Helena would have ever picked. It was made of soft, flowing chiffon, with a delicate, hand-beaded overlay of willow leaves that shimmered as I moved. It didn't hide my curves, it celebrated them. It felt less like a garment and more like an extension of myself. When I saw my reflection, I saw not a bride trying to fit a mold, but me. Just me, happy and radiant. Tears welled in my eyes, and in my mother's, and we knew. This was the one. In the weeks that followed, a strange and welcome silence fell from Helena's direction. There were no calls, no texts, no surprise weekend visits. She still spoke with Leo, of course, their conversations maintaining a semblance of normalcy that eased a tension I hadn't realized I was carrying for him. I threw myself into the whirlwind of final wedding preparations, a joyful blur of confirming caterers, arranging flowers, and handwriting place cards. The silence from Helena was a relief, a space in which the wedding could once again become ours. A few weeks before the wedding, in a burst of excitement and perhaps a naive hope that seeing my happiness would bridge the gap between us, I sent her a photo. It was a picture Chloe had taken of me in the dress at the final fitting, my face alight with joy. I held my breath after hitting send, hoping for a kind word, a shared moment of celebration. Her response came a few hours later. It was a single, solitary emoji, thumbs up. Just a thumbs up. No words. No exclamation points. I stared at the blue bubble on my screen, a dozen different interpretations swirling in my mind. Was it dismissive? A reluctant approval? A digital shrug? I didn't know what to make of it, and I realized, with a clarity that surprised me, that I didn't have to. I chose to let it go. I had more important things to focus on, more joyful currents to be swept up in. The wedding was close, and my heart was full. The day itself dawned with a pearly, ethereal light, the Oregon mist burning off to reveal a sky of the softest blue. Our venue was a restored barn on a bluff overlooking the ocean, the air thick with the scent of salt and cedar. Every detail was perfect, a testament to the love and care Leo and I had poured into it. As my father walked me down the aisle, a path strewn with white rose petals and fragrant eucalyptus, I saw Leo waiting for me. The look on his face, a breathtaking mix of awe, love, and profound happiness, swept away every last vestige of stress and anxiety. In that moment, nothing else mattered. We exchanged the vows we had written ourselves, our voices thick with emotion, and slipped rings onto each other's fingers. And just like that, in a blur of tears and laughter, we were married. The reception was a dream. String lights twinkled like captive stars inside the vast, high-ceilinged barn. The food was delicious, the music was perfect, and our first dance, which we'd taken lessons for, was a clumsy but joyful shuffle that felt like the most graceful waltz in the world. I moved through the celebration in a haze of pure bliss, my heart overflowing. Later in the evening, feeling thirsty from dancing, I made my way to the bar for a glass of water. Helena was there, leaning against the polished wood counter. She turned as I approached, her face arranged in a bright, cheerful smile that seemed a little too practiced. "Ilara, darling. You look absolutely breathtaking." Before I could respond, she picked up a tall, pinkish drink from the bar. "I ordered you a Shirley Temple. I know you don't really drink, and I thought you might like something sweet." It felt like an olive branch, a small gesture of peace. "Thank you, Helena," I said, genuinely touched. "That's so thoughtful." I took the glass from her hand, grateful for the attempt to mend the awkwardness that had lingered between us. I took a long, refreshing sip. It was sweet and fizzy, just as I'd expected. We chatted for a moment, the conversation light and pleasant, before I was pulled back to the dance floor by my cousins. A few minutes later, as I was laughing at one of my uncle's terrible jokes, a strange wave of dizziness washed over me. My limbs suddenly felt heavy, my head thick and fuzzy, as if it were stuffed with cotton. I attributed it to the sheer exhaustion of the day, the culmination of months of planning and a flood of adrenaline. I leaned against a wooden pillar to steady myself, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The joyful noise of the reception dissolved into a dull roar, the twinkling lights blurring into streaks of gold. And then, the world went dark. I came to in a haze of confusion, the sharp, antiseptic smell of rubbing alcohol cutting through the fog. Blurred figures swam above me, their voices a worried murmur. I was lying on a sofa just off the main reception area, and Leo was kneeling beside me, his face pale with fear. "Ilara? Honey, can you hear me?" Two EMTs, their faces calm and professional, were taking my pulse and asking questions. "Ma'am, can you tell us what you've had to eat and drink tonight?" My mind felt sluggish, but I managed to recount my meal and the single glass of champagne from the toast. "And a Shirley Temple," I murmured, my voice raspy. "Helena gave it to me." At the mention of her name, Helena herself stepped forward, her perfectly composed expression now crumbling with remorse. I confessed to them," she said, her voice trembling. She wrung her hands, avoiding my gaze. "The drink. I put a little something in it. Just a splash of vodka from my flask. I thought it would help you relax, loosen you up. It was just a joke, I didn't think." Stunned silence fell over our small group. I stared at her, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying slowness. The sudden drowsiness, the collapse. She had drugged me. At my own wedding. Why? To loosen me up? The violation of it felt like a physical blow. The situation escalated dramatically when Chloe, my loyal, clear-headed maid of honor, pushed through the circle of onlookers. Her face was tight with anger. "You have to tell them, Ilara," she urged, then turned to the EMTs. "She's on anxiety medication. She took a small dose this afternoon, before the ceremony." I had, indeed. The pre-ceremony jitters, the overwhelming desire for everything to be perfect, had churned my stomach into a knot of nerves. I'd taken a minimal dose of the medication my doctor had prescribed for occasional panic, just enough to take the edge off and allow me to be present in the moment. I'd never imagined it could be a danger. The lead EMT's expression sharpened. He looked from me to a distraught Helena. "Ma'am, mixing that class of medication with alcohol can be extremely dangerous. It can cause severe respiratory depression, loss of consciousness, even a coma. She's incredibly lucky her reaction wasn't more severe." The weight of his words settled in the room, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just a thoughtless prank. It was a reckless, dangerous act that could have had catastrophic consequences. The beautiful, magical day I had so carefully constructed had been irrevocably shattered, not by a simple mistake, but by a profound and bewildering breach of trust. After the EMTs gave me a clean bill of health and departed, the fragile peace of the evening imploded. Leo, who had been a silent, coiled spring of tension, finally turned to his mother. The anger in his eyes was a cold fire. I had never seen him look at her that way. "Get out," he said, his voice low and trembling with rage. Helena flinched as if struck. "Leo, please, it was a misunderstanding. I never meant to cause any harm." "I don't want to hear it," he cut her off, his voice rising. "You drugged my wife. On our wedding day. You lied to her, and you put her in danger. I want you to leave. Now." She stood there, stunned into silence, tears beginning to stream down her face, ruining her meticulous makeup. He was immovable, a wall of protective fury. Seeing the anguish on his face, the pain of being forced to choose between his mother and his wife on what should have been the happiest night of his life, broke my heart all over again. The festive atmosphere of the reception had evaporated, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. Guests, sensing the gravity of the family drama unfolding, began to make quiet, awkward exits. The music faded, the laughter died, and our dream reception ended not with a grand farewell, but with a sad, premature fizzle. Back in the quiet sanctuary of our hotel room, the adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow ache in its place. The beautiful white dress lay pooled on the floor, a symbol of a day that had been both perfect and perfectly ruined. I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by a deep, profound sadness. Leo sat beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, his silence a heavy cloak of shared grief. This was not how our forever was supposed to begin. In the days that followed, Helena's texts and voicemails were a constant, pleading presence on our phones. We didn't answer. We needed space, a quiet harbor to process the storm. Leo was caught in an impossible position, his love for his mother clashing with the deep betrayal he felt on my behalf. There was no easy path forward, no simple map to navigate the fractured landscape of our new family. Our honeymoon, a 5-week trip driving the scenic routes through the sun-drenched landscapes of Italy, was a necessary balm. We ate pasta, drank wine, explored ancient ruins, and slowly, carefully, began to heal. We talked for hours, not always about what happened, but about our future, our values, our commitment to protecting our shared life. In the quiet rhythm of the road, we reconnected, finding our way back to the simple, solid joy that had first brought us together. For 5 blissful weeks, the world felt blessedly normal. But reality was waiting for us. As we pulled into our driveway, weary from travel but hearts full of renewed hope, my stomach dropped. There, sitting on our porch steps, was Helena. The sight of her, a solitary, elegant figure against the familiar backdrop of our home, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. The peace we had so carefully cultivated on our trip felt fragile, threatened. I knew this confrontation was inevitable, but I wasn't ready. Worse, she didn't begin with an apology. As we approached, she stood up, her face a mask of aggrieved sorrow. She launched into a defense of her actions, her voice quivering with self-pity. She insisted it was all a terrible misunderstanding, a silly prank that had been blown completely out of proportion. Her refusal to grasp the gravity of what she had done was staggering. Leo, his patience worn thin, finally reached his limit. He stood between us, a quiet but unshakable barrier. "Mom," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "that's enough." He spoke calmly, but with a steely resolve I'd never heard from him before. He explained, with painful clarity, that what she had done was not a prank, but a violation. That she had broken not just my trust, but his. "You crossed a fundamental line, Mom," he continued, his voice steady. "And there are consequences for that. The only way forward is for you to understand what you did and to give Alara a sincere, unconditional apology. Until you can do that, our contact will be limited. We'll see you at Christmas and on major holidays. Like a distant aunt. That's all I can offer right now." Helena stared at him, her mouth agape. Then, the tears began again, this time not of self-pity, but of genuine shock and hurt. But Leo didn't waver. I could see the immense pain it caused him to draw this line with his own mother, but his loyalty to me, to us, was absolute. He was protecting our garden from an invasive species, even though it meant pruning a branch that was a part of him. The standoff continued for weeks. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang at my desk. It was the receptionist downstairs. "Alara, there's a Helena here to see you. She says it's urgent." My heart hammered against my ribs. A scene at my workplace was the last thing I wanted. Wary, I agreed to meet her at the small, quiet cafe across the street. The moment we sat down in a secluded booth, she dissolved into tears, loud, shuddering sobs that turned the heads of other patrons. He won't answer my calls, she wept, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Leo won't even read my texts. Ilara, you have to talk to him. You have to fix this. I can't bear this silence. She was pleading for me to be her intermediary, her advocate, to restore her relationship with her son. And yet, through all her tears, she still hadn't offered me an apology. She was so consumed by her own pain that she remained blind to the wound she had inflicted. Helena, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Showing up at my office and creating a scene in a public cafe is not the way to handle this. You need to go home and think. Truly think about what happened. Not about how you feel being ignored, but about why it's happening. You ruined my wedding day. You put my health at risk. It's not reasonable for you to expect me to simply smooth this over for you. But I didn't mean any harm, she cried, a familiar refrain. I feel just terrible about how you reacted. It's not about my reaction, Helena. It's about your action. Her crying intensified, and the weight of the cafe's curious stares felt suffocating. I wanted to disappear. I'll see what I can do, I said, the words a desperate bid for escape. I made no promises. I left her there, weeping into her coffee, and walked back to my office feeling shaken and profoundly conflicted. That evening, I called my own mother, Eleanor. I recounted the whole story, from the pancake comment to the cafe ambush. She listened patiently, her silence a comforting presence over the phone. When I finished, she sighed. Oh, my sweet girl. She sounds like a very unhappy woman who is terrified of losing her son. I know, Mom. But what do I do? The wise and gracious thing to do is to forgive, she said gently. For your own sake, so it doesn't eat away at you. And for Leo's sake. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean you don't get to have boundaries. You can forgive her and still keep a safe distance. Her advice was, as always, wise. But my heart remains a tangled knot. Helena's apology, when I finally prompted it in that cafe, felt hollow, elicited under duress rather than born of genuine remorse. A part of me, the part that tends to my gardens, knows that some things, once damaged, can never fully be repaired. Another part, the part that loves Leo so fiercely, aches for the rift in his family. I am standing at a crossroads. One path leads toward a guarded peace, protecting the sanctuary Leo and I have built. The other leads toward a difficult, uncertain reconciliation, for the sake of the man I love. I look at the life stretching out before me, a landscape yet to be designed, and I wonder, which path will allow the most beautiful things to grow? What should I do?